Welcome to Talent Hub Talk. I am Ben Duncan, and this is a place where prominent and inspirational figures from both the local ANZ and global Salesforce Ohana share their stories. In today's episode, I am joined by Atif Saad. Atif is the CTO and co-founder of SaasGuru. Atif has been a client of mine in the past and has a broad range of experiences in the Salesforce ecosystem. He has worked for an end customer to deliver a Salesforce program, joined a consulting firm as their COO, and helped them scale and realize a sale to a global systems integrator, where he then ran a large Salesforce practice and faced the challenges of team retention and attraction through the COVID period. Now at SaasGuru, Atif and his team are looking to solve the cloud skills crisis by creating the bridge between learning and certifications. In this episode, Atif shares the insight on his career and all of the things he has experienced during his time in the Salesforce ecosystem, plus what he is most excited about with SaasGuru. I hope you enjoy the episode. Atif, thank you very much for joining us from what I believe to be a sunny Dubai.
It sure is. Thanks for having me, Ben. It's been great in Dubai, actually.
So you're over there as a bit of a team building exercise?
Yeah, we did. So we were about to launch our mobile app, and we thought it would be much better for us all to be together in the same room.
Yeah.
The Dubai became a common ground for all of us. It's our first vacation, so we played hard and we worked hard.
Nice.
We come back home next week, so all good.
Yeah, very nice. Well, we won't go into detail about how much play because everyone listening will be jealous. But it's great that you're able to get away and I guess see people face to face, having been through the last couple of years. To actually collaborate with your team face to face must be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you don't realize how much you miss being together in the same room after COVID until you are actually in the same room and start collaborating. At least for me, that's been the case. We've all worked remotely for a very long time now, for a couple of years, and working in the same room has just been phenomenal.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I'm glad that we got a chance to do that.
Yeah, nice. Well, look, we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to cover the business you're in now towards the end of the episode, but I'm really keen to hear a bit more about you and your journey and your career to date. So, I know you. I've known you for several years, and I know what you've kind of done and the kind of roles you've had. But a lot of listeners won't have come across your career before, and also, I guess, will be interested in hearing right from the beginning. So, when you look back at your earlier career, what did you kind of really want to do, and was tech always something that you saw yourself kind of working with?
Tech was always the dream, to be quite honest. If I go back to my early days, as most kids of the 90s that were doing high school in the 90s, we wanted to do tech. Tech was the thing. Computers were just becoming norm. Internet was still shitty and slow. So it was hard. But back in if I go back in the mid 90s when I was doing my undergrad in US, or trying to at the very least, I saw there used to be this install and inspect factory in Houston where I was studying. And I saw a few of my friends work there, and it became one of those things that I wanted to do the most in life. I wanted to work for a company that built computers, that did computers. So it became somewhat obsessive that I wanted to do what they're doing, and perhaps wanted to be part of a computer business or an IT business. Didn't get a chance to do that in Houston. Fast forward a few years, and I was in Dubai, working in Dubai for a couple of years. That was in the early 2000s. And I was dropping my wife off to work, or I used to drop her every day, to a place called Internet City in Dubai. This is when Dubai was just starting to expand and explode. And in that area, there used to be a lot of these buildings that were, HPs and Microsoft, the giants of the time. And one of the buildings was Unisys. I used to see that building as the Apple of today, like clean white building with red logos on it. And I just wanted to be part of that business. I'd walk past, I'd drive past, and I thought, what would it take to be part of this business, right? And Unisys was always in the news at the time. They were doing really great. Again, didn't get a chance in Dubai either to work for IT. And then I landed in Australia a couple of years later. I would have applied for, a good 120, 130 roles or jobs for. and I would have gotten maybe 4 or 5 interviews out of it. And one of the interviews was in a company in Rhodes, and recruiter didn't tell me which company. So I was just madly trying to get to that business so that I could make that interview with probably $100 in my bank or $50 in my bank. Can't remember now. So we really needed a job. I'd been in Australia for a good couple of months and didn't have the job. The market wasn't like it is today. It wasn't like people knocking on the door and going, "Do you want work?"
Yeah.
It was very different back in early 2000s in Australia. So anyways, we got to that building. My wife was 7 months pregnant. We ran from the train station, Rhodes train station, to that building. And as soon as I got to that building, I saw big red Unisys sign on that building. I still didn't believe that I'm in Unisys. I just thought it would be another floor and I would be interviewing with someone else. But I walked into the building. It was the Unisys building. I interviewed with Unisys, and that was history. I worked for Unisys for 10 years after that in multiple roles, did IT, did project management, did operations, you name it. So yeah, I was fortunate, to be honest. My belief out of that is manifestation is real. You have to want something really, really badly. And the way I used to obsess over Unisys and ended up with a job here in Australia with them and worked for them for 10 years is just amazing. So yeah, that's how I started my career in IT.
That could have gone horribly wrong, couldn't it? Going to an interview, you don't even know what the company is. Like, luckily, it was Unisys, and because if the first question was why do you want to work here, that's great because you could explain why you did. Whereas if it was some other company, you'd have no idea.
I agree. I'd literally finished my my assessment with the recruiter. They gave the writing and the reading and all of that sort of stuff. I'd finished that and I was on my way home when she called and she said, "Listen, I've managed to get you an interview now. Do you want to go and do that? Can you make it?" And I'm going, I've gone from the city back to West and I'm going, shit, I'm not going to make it. So I was only in Australia for 2 months. I had no idea where Rhodes is. How do you get there? How do trains move? So Mrs. went, "All right, fine, I'll come with you." And that poor girl, like, she had to run. So yeah, it would have gone horribly wrong had they asked me that question, but I'm glad she did.
Nice.
She did ask me that question and it worked out.
Yeah, awesome. And I think you're right. Obviously, there was something in that, right? The fact that you'd had that vision and goal, and then ultimately it worked out. I think you're right around the manifestation. So you obviously you've been in management roles for quite some time now, and you obviously you were interested in tech, but you've gone down that kind of project management, program management, and leadership path, which is different to a lot of the people we've had on the podcast who went and studied computer science and went down that path.
Yep.
So what was it about management that attracted you? And did you find that you were always a good people manager?
I hope so. I think so. The best judge would be the people that I've managed to work with or served, I guess. But to be quite honest, I think people leadership is common sense. That's how I see it anyways. In my early career, people talk about good bosses, bad bosses. And in my early careers, I got a chance to work for some real assholes, to be quite honest. And when you work for someone like that and you want to drive change in perhaps how your life is, one of the things I started to pivot, at least in my own thinking, is I want to be in those shoes, in their shoes, and I want to do better. So, and how do you do better is, in my opinion at least, is to be able to create a better support system so that you stay human is perhaps the easiest part of thinking about it. You don't lose the human part of it and you stay connected to your people. I remember I was, again, in one of those 120 job interviews that I did when I first came to Australia. I interviewed for one of the fast food chains, and the way the restaurant manager communicated the rejection to me, it was heartbreaking. It made me feel so small that I thought, well, surely there's a better way of doing this. And I wanted to be in those shoes and do better. So I guess for me, what drives me is change. What drives me is ability to influence change or inflict change in people's lives for the better, and my own, of course. So yeah, people leadership just became the natural progression of that, where I could do that, affect change, and do better and show that there is a better way.
Do you think leadership has changed over the years in the sense that now, people are there's a lot more focus on open communication around like mental health and empathy and things like this compared to what there used to be. So for anyone that's moving into the leadership world now, do they have to have a different set of skills to potentially people in the past, or were good managers empathetic in the past anyway, but just they were the ones that stood out?
It has changed. So short answer to your question, I think, yes, 100% it's changed. There's so much acceptance. There's so much dialogue these days about things that would otherwise in the late 90s would be considered taboo, and people won't even raise their voices around it. So yeah, it's 100% changed. And a lot of the leaders today, I don't think will have to go through the struggles of the late 90s, early 2000s. But having said that, even in my experience, like looking back in my 25 odd years of work experience, they weren't all bad. Some of the people that I drove my energy from were amazing leaders, amazing bosses. They became the reason why I am who I am today, when I've achieved success because they decided to invest in me, to give me opportunities, to teach me what they know. So good leaders have always been around. It's not new, but at least people now are more aware of what people leadership is all about and how to affect someone else's career in a positive way. So if someone new was going into people leadership, I think those are the things to think about. Frankly speaking, you invest in other people's lives, in their professional and personal gain and growth. If you're able to do that, the rest of the business will take care of itself. And what I find as a leader, the other advice, I guess, for people that are going into people leadership is know the art. Being able to lead from example or from experience rather than academia is another thing that I find is really, really powerful and really useful for people leaders. They're respected. People like working for someone that knows their work, knows how to guide them and how to deal with them. So those are perhaps a couple of key ones for me. Is work for them and equally lead them by example.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if we move into the world of Salesforce, how did you kind of get your break into the Salesforce world? And at that point, you came in as was it a project manager or a program manager? And how did that compare to delivering projects in other fields that you'd worked on before?
Salesforce has been perhaps the best thing that's happened to me in my technical career. So I was lucky, right place, right time, to be able to land a program like Salesforce at the time. I remember there was a program kicking off in my previous world for Salesforce Program of Works. Part of that program was implementing a debt recovery platform. So I'd done that in the past. In my previous experience, I'd built a debt recovery platform. In fact, I used to manage a debt team in the mortgage space. So the fact that I had that experience and the fact that I'd built a product around it gave me an opportunity to lead that program. I asked for it, and the business and the leaders at the time helped invest in both the technology and getting me up to speed on Salesforce. So I was fortunate, just right place, right time. I guess the CIO at the time was really great when it came to enabling teams and enabling the strategy of Salesforce. So I got to learn from him how to think about Salesforce strategy. Salesforce, generally speaking, if I look back and see what projects I've done in the past and how that helped, or perhaps different from Salesforce, the one thing that helped, at least in the context of my previous experience, is I've done a lot of object-oriented work in the previous world as well, and a lot of the integration between cores that I'd worked on and delivered on projects. So that was perhaps there was no difference in the way that Salesforce integrates with other platforms and or how the data model works within Salesforce. So that was useful in my previous experience that I could move into the Salesforce world. And one of the things I like the most, I guess, is in my previous life, I had to worry about things like infrastructure, redundancy, disaster recovery, security, performance, you name it. You have to think about every aspect before you implement a project. But with Salesforce, I didn't have to. I had to, all of that is managed. So I don't have to worry about some of those basics. You still have to think about how you're going to build and how you're going to worry about security and perhaps scalability in the way you're approaching your build, but you don't have to worry about some of the basic fundamentals. So that was my first experience with true SaaS, and it really helped not worrying about some of the basics and focus on learning the platform and perhaps the features that you're delivering.
Was just out, because I know the company you're working for and I know the kind of timescale, just from a resourcing perspective, when you first moved into the Salesforce world, was it more difficult to attract Salesforce talent than what you'd been used to in other technologies?
Not at the time. So if I look back, we're talking now 2015, 16, the Salesforce talent has, so in general terms, Salesforce talent has been harder to source forward than other tech. But back in 2016, 15, 16, it wasn't as intense as it is now. You're perhaps in the leading space of that, so you understand that space a lot better. So back in 2015, 16, I don't think it was as intense. Nowadays, it's completely nuts. But it was hard all the same, even then.
Sure.
It was a growing platform at the time, right? So at the time, Salesforce and MuleSoft weren't one business. So if you were doing something with Salesforce and MuleSoft, there weren't necessarily any integrations. You had to build everything from ground up. Now, over time, things have just become even more, perhaps easier in that context, that you are probably going to get someone that understands both.
Mm-hmm. So you spent a period of time with that company working on a transformation, and then your next move was into the consulting world. So what was it that attracted you to consulting? And the role that you took on, I think straight away, was the COO role, right?
Yes. So consulting is what I did, right? At Unisys, that's what their business was. It's all I did for 10 odd years, both in the ITO and BPO space, particularly BPO. So when I left Unisys, I took a gap year and I traveled around Australia with my family for a while. And that gave me some time to think about what I want to do next. And what I wanted to do next is not do consulting, because I'd done it for 10 years and I wanted to be in the customer's shoes. And to me, at least, grass is greener on the other side, or was greener on the other side. So when I came back, I wanted to be on the customer side, and I got a chance to work on that. But after delivering that program of works at Salesforce programs of work, what I perhaps realized is the reason I grew fast in Unisys at the time is because I had an opportunity to work on different projects, that I had opportunity to work on different clients. I had an opportunity to interact with different businesses. When you work for a customer side, you don't necessarily have that. At least not to the extent of what you get in an SI or consulting business. So that's what attracted me back to consulting. I just wanted to go back because I knew that growth was better. I was learning a lot more. And that's how I ended up back in consulting. The CEO role was more around delivery operations, and it was perhaps one of the most rewarding and the hardest role I've ever done. You're, as a CEO, I'm an advisor to my customers. I'm responsible for delivering the promise. I'm also the escalation point. I'm also the people leader. I'm also there to drive new improvements, change ways of working, all the while still trying to manage and hire people for growth. And especially in a business like SaaS Focus that was growing, 50%, 60% year on year, at one point 100% year on year. The keeping up with the talent acquisition was equally a harder challenge. So yeah, it stretched me big, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every second of it. I think I got a chance to grow in that business a lot, and a lot of the previous experience, it felt like everything was lining up for that event, for that moment in my life when I was offered the CEO role. All the experience I had in program management, program delivery, non-Salesforce tech, and then Salesforce all led to that role where I was able to draw on my previous experience of program management and absolutely learn new skills.
Yeah. And that company was acquired, and I think companies being acquired isn't abnormal in the Salesforce ecosystem, but they sometimes just kind of seem to happen, right? So for people that are in the market and might not be working for the partner that's being acquired, or even sometimes people that are working for the partner that's being acquired, sometimes they kind of don't see what goes on behind that, the groundwork to that point.
Yep.
So what is the process typically like for a company being acquired? Like, what goes into that behind the scenes before the announcement's made?
So this was my third acquisition. So this wasn't my first acquisition gig. In the past 15 odd years, I'd gone through 3 different businesses that were acquired by someone else. So I was used to that already. And it was one of the reasons why I was brought on board in SaaS Focus as well, that, that was always the intent, and therefore be part of the journey and look at what are some of the foundations that we need to establish then for the acquisition. But the real challenge, I think, what people don't see behind the scenes is outside of the acquisition activities that forget the contractuals and the commercials. There's tons of painstaking work that goes in, and an army of people that are trying to align business processes, cultures, delegations, structures. And each aspect of this takes weeks, takes people time to be able to align on and agree on the different aspects. So, for example, if you look at a large organization, most large organizations are hierarchical. They'll have senior manager, associate directors, that level of hierarchy that has different pay grades, different perks, and so on and so forth. When you look at a business that is being acquired, mostly they won't have that. There will be a very flat structure. So just being able to align each person to that grade or to that level takes weeks of effort. It's not just about some data that is used, but it's also about management overlays to consider what are some of the things that we should consider for people and not, to be able to eventually come up with this person goes here. And 9 out of 10 times it works, but then 1 out of 10 times it won't work, and that requires more discussions, I guess more exceptions handling. And that's just one example. But if I look at another example would be a decision matrix. How a boutique business would make decisions would be literally people walking up to the CEO, COO, whoever, or your leader in general, have a conversation, a decision's made on the spot. In a larger business, in a GSI type business, those decisions don't necessarily get made by one person. There are multiple delegations that are given to people, and then you have to kind of step back and consider how do you ensure you don't stifle the leadership that is being acquired, and yet still keep them within the realms of the delegations matrix that is within the existing organization, right? So those are just a couple of examples to give you a little bit of a flavor of what are some of the things that we have to go through to be able to land on, yes, now it's going to work, and this is how we will integrate with the business that is acquired.
And these conversations are typically happening quite often, right? So we obviously see a couple of companies be acquired a year, but there's kind of ongoing discussions behind the scenes, right? Where there'll be someone that's looking to make an acquisition, and there's companies out there that are open to being acquired, but the timing might just not be right, and then all of a sudden it is right, and then the delegation of people turn up to go through all of the documentation and to go through all the financials and so on, and then eventually the deal is made. But there's kind of people having discussions all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, without speculating on others, but the first conversations never are the ones that actually result in the acquisition, at least not generally speaking. Most of the smaller boutiques will be talking to multiple people, or multiple organizations will be approaching them over a course of a few years. Some work, some don't, and at least for us, some of the thinking was around culture fitment, and hands down to the team that actually did the acquisition, that actually did the integration work. They did a really phenomenal job for us, and the due diligence includes, is there a cultural alignment with the business that we're about to merge with? And if the answer is yes, then at least, you kind of take the team that you have and integrate them. Okay. But if there isn't, culturally speaking, they're so different, then it's just not going to work. And I've seen some really horrible examples of integrations and acquisitions, and some good examples, including SaasFocus. So yeah, absolutely. Those conversations happen long before, I guess, any documentation is signed and the deal is done.
And what makes a company valuable then? Is it the people? Is it the track record? Is it the client base? Like what? Because you see some of these acquisitions where then people leave straight away, and you think to yourself, well, were they acquiring that business because of those people, or is it just the brand? And I guess it all comes together, right? But is it predominantly the people in the team that put the value to the acquisition?
100%. Like you said, there are obviously multiple things that make a business valuable, but a services business is nothing but people. So yeah, absolutely. When a business is being acquired, they're acquiring the business because they believe in the people's ability to grow that business, and having seen that track record of that growth is the reason why someone would buy any business, I guess. But in services business, when you don't have a product behind you per se, that you are providing services, those services are at the back of the people that are part of that business. So if you were looking at one answer, then it would be absolutely the people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which is, and then that's why the merge and having that culture right is so important, because otherwise that's when we see people kind of upping and leaving within weeks of an acquisition going through.
Yeah. And the example that I gave you for when we're trying to integrate people and trying to work out which grade they go on and stuff, those are some important factors. People leave because they don't feel that they were given the right levels, or they're given the right seniorities, because all of a sudden that becomes relevant. And I'm just using this as an example. I've seen this in the past couple of acquisitions, and getting those things right, which is all leading up to the integration and perhaps post acquisition and into the integration, is key. Is the absolute important aspect of any acquisition.
So again, we'll continue focusing on partners, because at the moment everyone seems to be growing, right? Everyone's hiring, everyone's predicting growth. Our annual survey, people were predicting huge amounts of growth. How does a partner kind of assess their pipeline for the year and then determine how much growth they expect and need? Is there a really accurate formula behind this, or is it just we'll hire anyone that's good and hope we have projects coming through for them?
Yeah, we could spend hours on this point, but we won't. The honest truth is there is no magic formula. And if there was one, and I can walk you through at least my thought process around it as in SaasFocus. But the reality is anything that I did do was quickly thrown out because COVID changed all the dynamics. So for example, if I give you the 2 or 3 lenses of what I used to apply in the context of growth and being able to hire people. The first aspect of that is capacity planning, right? I know the people that I need, the number of people that I need to be able to achieve a set growth rate. So if I know that I need to grow my business by 50% next year, then I know that I need X number of extra people, both onshore and offshore, to be able to achieve that outcome. Then I know I need to factor attrition in it. I know that there will be some level of attrition in our business, and therefore I need to proactively hire for that as well. And then the third lens in all of that is my track record so far. So what have I done month on month or quarter on quarter in terms of previous growth, and how does that pipeline convert? How quickly do they convert? What's the average conversion rate, and so on and so forth, right? For example, it takes us 30 days to close a deal. Then I know I have 30 days to hire ahead, and I know what the probability of that opportunity is because I'm talking to customers on practically the daily basis. So that was the norm before COVID. That you could do that mathematically to some degree of confidence to say, I'm not going to have a problem. I'm already talking to these customers. I know my track record is this. I know my relationships are going X, and I know the market, so I need to hire ahead. COVID threw all of that out. If I was growing 50% before, now I'm growing 100%. Everybody wants cloud. Everybody wants SaaS. So none of my previous models work. In that context, I'm sure everybody tried different tricks and techniques, but for me particularly, it was important to stay on top of the conversations. If I have 20 salespeople talking to different businesses, I need to know every conversation they're having. I need to know how close they are to that conversation, and because everybody needed lead time. I mean, you were at the forefront of this, so you would know this. If I'd come to you and said, I need somebody now in 2015, 16, I would get that person in the next couple of days. And it was the same conversation with our own talent acquisition teams, right? They needed lead time to be able to go out there in the market and apply all their tips and tricks to be able to hire. So the only thing that worked for us, or for me particularly, is being able to stay on top of those conversations, knowing that attrition is just normal in this market. For a good couple of years, that's been normal. So we need to allow for that, factor for that. We were lucky we didn't have as bad an attrition rate, but all the same, still had to factor that in. And then keep hiring. There was a level of judgment in all of this. When you know that there's so many conversations going, you don't sit there with a pen and paper and go, I need to hire 5 people and 10 people. You just go out and say, well, we need to hire 30 people because we know we will continue to grow.
Yeah.
Those are really, simple things to do. Mathematics kind of went out of the way as soon as COVID hit and people started pivoting to cloud.
So it's interesting because I remember when COVID did first hit, everyone was still a little bit unsure. And I know obviously quite quickly it became apparent that there was going to be a lot of growth and demand. But there were some consulting companies stood down staff or reduced pay, and some let people go. I know of some that had signed up new employees to join and then pulled the offers right at the beginning of COVID. So was it really apparent to you that quickly that there was going to be this demand, or did you ever have concerns about being able to keep your team engaged and on projects?
I think if we're talking let's look at the first quarter of COVID, then I think everybody was nervous. We didn't know what was going to come. There wouldn't be a single leader that was not worried about what's going to come next. The good thing for us was, I think, the utilization of the business was so high at the time. And we had so much going already, and none of the clients had actually pulled projects, which was one of the key reasons why people were getting nervous. That they were end customers that were kind of putting projects on hold and on the back burner until they saw what was happening and what was the outcome of COVID. Right? We were lucky that most of our customer base didn't do that. None of the projects went on the back burners, didn't go on hold, so our utilization remained high. And by the time we the dust settled on, what is COVID going to bring, or what is the adoption going to be like, things had already started peaking. So we were going on the opposite side, where clients are going, well, I need 10 of this and I need 20 of this, and everybody's struggling because a lot of the consulting companies had, like you rightly said, had let go of people. So all of a sudden we started seeing demand that was also by default coming to us because of others not being able to fulfill it. So there was multiple factors for that. We were just, I think, fortunate at the time that we had clients that didn't put projects on hold and therefore didn't need to go through that cycle of pulling offers or letting people go or reducing salaries. None of that happened for us.
How obviously we spoke about when you first got into the ecosystem and how hard hiring was at that point. It wasn't anywhere near as difficult as now, but genuinely for people that don't understand how difficult it is to hire a really good Salesforce developer or a really good architect in Australia right now, what was your take on that when you were in that hiring capacity in your last organization? Just how difficult was it to find someone?
Very. And it becomes even more difficult when you're trying to hire in distributed manner. So different geos, different locations, different skills. The cloud engineering skills, like developer, architect in particular, and tech leads, if I was to highlight those three, were the hardest ones to hire for. And to be honest, I think I found also that even if you did manage to hire someone, whether they would stick around or not was another question altogether. Mm-hmm. Whether they would even join on day one was another question. So just because they've accepted the offer doesn't necessarily mean people would join. And pre-COVID, that frankly wasn't the norm. If somebody had signed a contract, they would join it. It was the norm in the job market overseas, but certainly not in Australia. That changed. In Australia, it started happening as well, that people would sign contracts and still not turn up. So yeah, it was hard. It was hard to find people. And I think everyone worked on all six all the time to be able to fulfill demand. And I mean everyone, the talent acquisition teams, the recruiters, the partner recruiters, HR teams, the hiring managers. Everyone had to constantly try and balance things, not just go and put ads out and think, well, people would apply. You had to leverage your own network. You had to go out and on LinkedIn and start messaging people. And it wasn't just leaving it to tag or HR teams. We had to do it ourselves. I personally had to sit there and start sending messages going, do you want to be part of this team? Giving them a perspective of what it is like to be part of SaaS Focus. I didn't want people to hear it third hand, second hand, because I found that wasn't very powerful. But when I was there doing it myself, that worked. That worked better, at least, because they were hearing it from the horse's mouth, I guess. So any trick and trip that was applied, perks, salary, retention strategies, everything was being thrown at least those top skills that developers, technical lead, and architects, to be able to, one, retain them, and two, hire new talent.
Well,
was hard.
You've been out of the hiring manager role for a little while now. I can tell you nothing's changed. Us recruiters say that we have the hardest sales job in the world because it's the only sales role where the product candidates can say no. You sell an IT solution and there's nowhere the solution pulls out. It might not be the right solution, but at least it says yes.
Yeah.
Whereas that's been the biggest challenge is that kind of commitment issue, and finding people that are true to their word. And we've seen all sorts of crazy things over the last few years, like people working multiple contract roles, being paid by two companies at the same time. Like, it kind of turned into the Wild West.
I agree, mate. I agree. That last 2 years have been interesting, an eye opener, to be honest. And how some people, I shouldn't generalize, but how some people have reacted to that. 2 jobs, yes, okay, I will do both. Because you're working from home, I guess that there's no aspect of being in the office.
Yeah.
People have taken advantage of that. Rightly or wrongly, I won't debate it. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride, I'm sure. And for you, I'm sure, and on most recruiters, to be honest, one of the things that and I think it's the most underrated, untalked about, I should say, is the stress or the mental health stress that this period has particularly taken on those that are, frankly, in your shoes, in hiring shoes, in talent acquisition roles, or in HR roles. They've worked tirelessly because the demand hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
And the behavior of those that are wanting to join businesses has changed. There's no precedence of it unless you've come from a country that already had that previously. So it's kudos to everybody. And I was lucky, and I have to say this, I was lucky that I had the best team ever that supported me in that time. Otherwise, I would have just gone mad. But it would have been hard for most people in those shoes, like yourselves.
Yeah, and I think the good thing from a recruitment perspective to come out of this period is I think talent acquisition as a function now has a seat at the table within a business. Like not just external providers, but that talent acquisition internal function is seen as more than just a function that finds people for roles. And I think that's it's valued a lot more because no business can grow without talent, and talent isn't just putting an advert on a job board. There is a real strategy behind that from way before you hire right through to retention and offboarding people. So I think that's definitely the perception of the role of a recruiter within a business has changed.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
So SaasGuru, so your new venture, you've stepped out of the world of consulting and you've taken on a new challenge with a new startup business. So what was it that really excited you about the vision of SaasGuru?
Driving change. That's if I was to call out one thing, it's driving change. I talked about it earlier as well. For me, what drives me is being able to affect change, and knowing that I'm part of a business whose entire mission is about changing the way education is being perceived, particularly technology education is being handled today. is what excites me. It's what that gets me out of bed every morning. The industry that SaasGuru is in, the edtech industry, I believe is at a cusp of major overhaul. We've seen a lot of micro innovation in this space, but none at a macro innovation level. We've gone from classroom type training and certification prep to MOOCs type, where it's all online based. And that's why I call it micro innovation, but not necessarily anything that has been major, where the way we are training people or we are getting them ready for a job, which is the end outcome of all of this, hasn't changed a whole lot. People are still trying to work out what courses they need to go through, what should they do. That's really making it accessible for everyone and changing the way training currently works in the edtech space is what excites me, and that's the reason why I started the business.
And having worked for a major global brands, Cognizant, Unisys back in the day, and obviously having experienced the kind of bigger end of town and the more kind of, I guess, lots of red tape. I would imagine, decisions take a lot longer to be approved or to go through. What's it like now going into that kind of startup world where everything's new and everyone's kind of looking to make a huge impact?
Really great. It's very different to the larger organization type roles, but I like the hustle of startup. I like the fact that if I'm not physically busy, I'm mentally busy nonstop. And you wake up with an idea, and it's genuinely speaking, that's what it is. I wake up every morning going, shit, we could try this. Why don't we try this? And then you end up with a list of things that you want to do. You're learning new skills every day. You want to try new things all the time. And the only thing that you can't do is stretch any further. So just because you've got a list 10 mile long doesn't necessarily mean I can do all of it. So, ruthless prioritization and discipline perhaps are the two best friends that I now have. But what I enjoy about, I guess, the SaasGuru as a business, as a brand, is the fact that I get a sense of purpose in my bones, if that makes any sense. It's so different to being in a larger organization that I can wake up in the morning, I can think of something, and I can try and experiment with that right now, right there. Is what I enjoy the most.
Absolutely. And you've touched on the kind of skills that are difficult to find in the Salesforce ecosystem, but what are you seeing as the biggest, I guess, the biggest gaps and the biggest challenges to recruit for businesses across the board, and how are SaasGuru playing a role to solve that problem?
Mate, good question. So when we talk about talent in general speaking, in general terms, right? Forgetting the depth of it, if we just look at it at 50,000 feet, that talent just doesn't exist. So we need to find how to create that talent. That is the basic problem. And I think about this a lot only because I guess I'm in a business that I need to. There are a lot of hiring managers, a lot of people in larger businesses that still think of talent in the same traditional way that they were thinking a few years ago. We're still looking for number of years of experience. We're still looking for, what previous jobs that they had. Have they got a specific skill set before we would even hire? And it's on their resume, yes or no. And the exclusion criteria still exist. Some resumes are just not even being assessed. They don't even get a seat at the table the first time around because their resumes are kind of filtered out. I don't understand why that part is not evolving, knowing that there is such shortage in skills. The natural aspect of that would be fine. Let's find where the next talent is. And the next talent is either those that are pivoting their careers and wanting to get into, I'm using Salesforce as an example, but wanting to get into Salesforce, or they are grads coming out of universities, and even better, they're sitting in high schools today. Like that's the only places we can get people from. So the fact that that exclusion criteria still exist, frankly, disappoints me as a cohort of IT, as leaders in IT. We should do different. We should do better. We can change this dynamic of shortage of skills but we need to all do our part in that. So that's, I guess, just at a macro level. In terms of shortage of skills, all cloud engineering developers, architects are in high demand. And that's just across the board. You look at Salesforce, you look at AWS, you look at ServiceNow, you look at GCP, Azure, you name it. Every technology, because we're now covering multi-technologies in SaasGuru in terms of training and enablement, I'm kind of seeing the same problem everywhere. And the way I'm approaching it at the moment is short-term goals and long-term goals, right? Short-term goals, if you think about what's needed right now, is there are three things. People need certs. That just it is still the step into their first job. Cert prep space in its entirety is vastly ignored. People are still there. You've got a scale of either I'm going to help someone go through certification, or worse, unethically, they'll take dumps and then try and learn from that. We all know that. So what SaasGuru is doing in that space is we kind of flipped it. We've said we've got a technology solution. Yes, we have mock exams, but they are built from scratch. They are built by leaders in that space. So AWS, Salesforce, ServiceNow, you name it. And the technology is helping them with what we call a cert readiness score, and telling them, are you ready for your cert? Yes or no? And it's just that simple. Some smarts, some AI that's driving that logic, of course. But at the end of the day, we've got a 98% success rate. So if our platform says you're ready, 98% chance that you are actually going to pass the certification. So cert prep is the single most important category in the sense that they are able to use that to get their foot through the door. The second aspect is training. And I've seen the same training costing almost nothing to thousands of dollars. And again, just in your context, talking Salesforce, what we're trying to do is the training itself isn't just about Salesforce. That's not what makes job ready folks. They need consulting skills. They need industry skills. They need advisory skills, soft skills. So how do we create a holistic person who's able to walk through the interview, get through the door the first time round? And for businesses, that they don't have to spend 6 months training and educating someone to upskill, right? So that's the second aspect of where SaasGuru is trying to bridge the gap. We've now launched only last week, actually. It starts in a couple of days, I think. We've launched a bootcamp, and the bootcamp is specifically targeted towards people where we teach them consulting skills. We teach them how to write business cases, what are advisors doing in that space, and then give them hands-on project work where they can apply all of those learnings from day one in their new employment. The last aspect of short-term goals is cost of training and certification is the largest barrier when we speak to any of the 16, 17,000 learners. Cost of training, right? So we're trying to work out a way where we can build EMI type schemes, income share agreement type schemes that allows them to learn now and think about paying later once they have a job. So that's another aspect of what we're trying to cover from a SaasGuru perspective. And that gives me a sense of at least short-term goals. Over the next 6 to 12 months, that's what we would want to apply and affect change. Long-term, long-term is still a constant thought. Perhaps it's more about experimentation than anything else. I talked about where the skills lie. The skills lie in my mind, and this is just my personal view. The skills lie in high schools today. There are kids that are already aware of how cloud works, how SaaS works. You give them a task, they're able to do it. One of SaasGuru's learners is a 13-year-old girl that's just passed their Salesforce admin certification, right? So it's for the new generation of kids, a lot of this is intuitive. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm trying to experiment with long-term, how do we train and arm an army of our high school kids who are the future and get them upskilled so they don't go through 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of masters, and then land their first job in IT. They're ready now if we train them. That's at least a thought. So long term, that's where I'm kind of targeting to access the skill from.
And I believe you're also you work with companies, right? So to help bring people through for opportunities that they would have coming up, like a global SI might need to hire X amount of people and can partner with you to to get people job ready. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, we've got a lot of large GSI customers where we're training their cohorts, we're training their people. So they've hired people themselves, but then asked us to train them, get them consulting ready, get them Salesforce ready, so that they hit the ground running in the first 8 to 10 weeks type things. So yeah, we do a lot of that. We do both B2B and B2C in that context.
Yeah, amazing. So if there's anyone listening that is kind of interested in exploring that further, be that B2B or B2C, where's the best place to find you and to reach out?
So SaasGuru.co, www.saasguru.co. All the information is on the website. Frankly, I would love to have those conversations directly. So reach out to me directly on my email or through LinkedIn. Happy to have any conversations and help coach, mentor individuals that are wanting to be part of the Salesforce ecosystem, AWS ecosystem, ServiceNow ecosystem. Just reach out and I'll help and support in any way I can. SaasGuru has a Slack community as well. So if you go to saasguru.co, there's a Slack community of thousands of people that are kind of collaborating in bridging the gaps of skills, in cross-training, in learning. So if you have any questions, anyone has any questions around where to go next, just post it in that community. There's a group of gurus that would help. In fact, one of the key things that we're trying to drive is build a world-first SaaS community that brings all of the technologies together. All the advice, all the guidance is in that one community. So reach out, go to www.saasguru.co, and you'll be able to become part of the Slack community as well as reach out to me directly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed hearing about your journey and some of your advice on working in consulting, growing consulting businesses. And yeah, it was interesting to get your take on the challenges of hiring through COVID as well, because I felt that pain for sure. And really exciting to see the growth and future endeavors of SaasGuru and some big lofty goals to achieve. So looking forward to seeing you hit them.
Thanks, mate. I really appreciate you having me here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the chat. And if you did, please make sure you have subscribed for future episodes that are coming through. I would also be very grateful if you would consider leaving a review on your chosen podcast platform, as 5-star reviews will help us to reach more trailblazers from across the world. I look forward to sharing another episode with you soon, and thanks again.